Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today is lecture 4, and we'll be talking about APIs today. Okay, just for a little recap, if you remember last week, we were talking about the DOM manipulation. So basically, how to create elements in our HTML, how to get elements from their ID, creating functions, and adding event listeners to make something happen in our DOM if we do a specific action, like clicking a button, and how to add an element to our HTML by appending it to a different element. Okay, so this all should look familiar. If it still looks confusing to you, probably review the information from last week. Okay, so let's get into APIs. So, what is an API? Well, let's use this example to start us off, okay? So imagine you're working at the National Weather Service and you have a system that stores weather data. Other software developers are writing weather apps that want to access your data. So, how do you serve these clients the data they need? Well, we don't want to just give them direct access to our database. That could get complicated, and we don't want them to have that much agency to our data. So instead, what we're going to do is create an API. So this API is kind of like a clean standardized interface that is a barrier between our actual database and our clients. Okay. So you can see, let's say the Apple Weather app, it can request our weather data through the API, and in response, we give it that data. And we can do this with however many clients we want. Okay, another example. Let's say you work at a cafe and they want to include an interactive map feature so that customers can more easily find their store locations. Okay, well, we're not gonna, as a company, we're not gonna build this map interface ourselves. That could take way too long and is not worth our time. So instead, we use an API, in this case, the Google Maps API. This will make it way easier, and you can see a lot of different websites already use it, like this museum, Zillow, and many, many others. So APIs just make your life easier so you don't have to do extra work that somebody like Google Maps have already done. Okay, so the main problem that APIs solve is software written by different people sometimes need to interact with each other. And the solution, like I said, are APIs, which are interfaces that expose an interface exposed by a service that allows other services to interact with it. Okay. So we have like a formal definition and then an informal definition. I think remember whichever one makes the most sense to you. It's not something you have to like know word for word, but it just helps you better understand it. So the formal definition is a set of features and rules that exist inside a software program, enabling interaction with it through software. The informal definition is an API is the bridge that allows one software program to talk to another software program, enabling you to request and exchange information in a way that is easily understandable and organized. Okay, so let's look at one more analogy. This is, I think, the best way to understand it, better than even the definitions. Okay, let's say you're going to a restaurant. You're going to order food, which is making a request to the waiter. The waiter executes your request by going to the kitchen and telling them your order. Eventually, the waiter will serve you the food, but you don't have to worry about how the food was made. All you have to do is tell the waiter what you want and they'll bring it to you. This is similar to how APIs work because the waiter is like the API. We tell the API what we want to get, and they go behind the scenes and then get it for you. You don't have to worry about how they got that information. You just need to receive it from it. Okay. So HTTP APIs, okay? These are the most common APIs that we'll be using because they help you interact on the web. So HTTP, what does that mean? Um, this is like the foundation of communication on the web. It's how basically how browsers talk to servers. So it has this thing called client server protocol, which basically means that the client makes requests and then the server sends back responses. Okay. So yeah, just like I said, these are the components of the HTTP system. Okay, so what is the client? Um, the client is what is initiating the request. Okay. So almost always the browser is going to be this entity that is making the request. So for example, let's say you type a URL in Chrome and you hit enter. Well, the browser is going to act as the client, which sends an HTTP request to get you the website that you're trying to search up. The web server is the other end of it. Okay, so it runs the API and it serves up assets like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, um, so that you can actually, like, let's say, get the website, see the website on your computer. It also can connect to databases to fetch and store data. Okay, so how does a request look like? Let's look at another analogy. Okay, mail, very similar to mail. Let's say you want to send a letter to your friend asking for a photo of their new puppy. Well, there's two things you need to do this. First, you need their address. Secondly, you need the information you want to ask for. In this case, it's the picture of the puppy. Well, this is similar to an API. In this case, your friend is the API you're getting the information from, and you're asking for a puppy photo, which is similar to what we call a GET request, because you're getting information from your friend, or in API terms, the API, and the friend or the API will send that information back. Okay, a second analogy in terms of mail is, let's say you want to send a gift to your friend. To do so, once again, you need their address and you need the gift you want to send them. So, what type of request is this? Well, once again, your friend is the API, and instead of a GET request, we're doing a POST request because posting basically means you're like sending data to the server, or again, in this case, your friend. So, once again, you are posting the information, and which basically means the same as you're sending the information to your friend for them to keep. Okay, so both asking your friend for information and sending a gift to your friend are both very similar to a request you would make to an API. Okay, so just think about it like this. Um, get a get request is for retrieving information, and a post request is for sending information. But either way, both are HTTP requests that you will use very often. Okay, let's look at one more example for get and post. Let's say you have a database for dad jokes, okay? Well, if you want to get a dad joke from the database, you can send a GET request. But if you want to add a dad joke to the database, you would send a post request. Okay, so just remember, GET reads, post creates. Okay. Now, let's look at some parts of the request and the response. There are quite a few. First of all, endpoints. Okay? So, in the mail analogy, you need to know their address. Well, in terms of APIs, this would be what we call an endpoint. Okay? So, the formal definition is an endpoint is a specific URL provided by an API that allows you to access certain functionalities or retrieve certain data. Okay? So, basically, it's an address that you visit to get what information you need. Okay. So let's look at this example. Let's say the base URL for an API is animalimages.com. Okay. Well, An example of an endpoint would be, let's say, dog. So let's say maybe that endpoint gets you a dog image. Well, you would put slash dog on the end of your URL, and that would get you a picture of a dog. And you can see, you can do this many other ways. You can see all these highlighted portions are endpoints, and you always do this format. You do the type of request you want to do. So in this case, it's get the URL or the base URL, and then whatever endpoint you want to use to get the information you need. And there are many different types of endpoint, or yeah, many different types of endpoints. We already know get and post, but you also do put, which updates something in your database, and delete, which deletes something in your database. Okay. So let's do some check-in questions. You can pause the video, ponder on these questions, come up with answers, and then we'll go over them in one, two, three. Okay, number one, if I want to retrieve information about the weather from a weather API, what type of request would I send? Well, I hope you said the answer get because we're retrieving information. Okay, number two, if I want to update a book in the Books API, what type of request would I send? The answer would be put because that updates a value in your database. Okay, third, if I want to add a dog image to a dog image API, what type of request would I send? Well, in this case, you would send a post request because you're adding a new value. Okay, hope you got those all right. If not, that's okay. Just review a little more. Okay, another component of our requests and responses are headers. Okay, so you can have headers for requests and you can also have headers for responses. Both just provide information about or more detailed context about either the request or the response. Okay. So there are many different types of headers. For requests specifically, there's headers, which proves you have permission to access an API. There's content type headers, which tells the server what format the data is in, for example, like JSON. There's accept headers, which tells the server what format you want the response in. And then there's user agent headers, which identifies what client is making the request. And here is what a full HTTP request looks like. You can see on the first line, we have the request type. So in this case, it's post. And then we have the endpoint to specify what specific information we want to get. We have the long list of headers. And then finally, we have the request body, which you don't always have to have for post and put. You have to have a request body, but for something like get, where you're just receiving information, there's nothing you need to send. So there's no need for a request body. Okay, another aspect we need to learn about are status codes. So these are basically three-digit numbers that are returned as a part of your API response. Okay, they tell you different things about if your request worked. Okay, so for example, if there's a one in front of the number, then that means that the request was received, but it's still being resolved. If there's a two, that means it was received, processed, and successfully resolved. If there's a three, that means it was redirected to another endpoint. If there was a four, that means that it was a bad request. So something like there was no clearance, there's a paywall, it was not found. And lastly, if there's a five, that means there was a server error. Okay. So these status codes can help you a lot when you're trying to debug, okay? It's the first place you want to look to see what type of error you ran into. So these are some examples of status codes that are good to know. So for example, you might have seen 404. Let's say you're like searching up a website and it's not a valid URL, where, well, you oftentimes see that 404, that means that it was not found, right? So looking at the status codes and determining what each status code means can help you determine what error happened in your code. Okay, and there are dozens, if not thousands, of APIs out there that you can use. This GitHub here, if you want to follow that link, there's a bunch of public APIs that you can use in your projects. Um, but yeah, there's a plentiful amount of APIs that are at your fingertips. Okay, so what are some tools we can use to make API requests? Well, in this class and a lot of times in the real world, you'll be using this website called Postman. So basically, Postman is an API development tool which helps us build, test, and modify APIs. There's plenty of features and it makes it very easy and very understandable to use APIs. Okay, so let's actually try it out. Okay, I'll walk you through how to set it up. But it's pretty simple. So we're gonna follow this link. So follow this link with me. It's gonna redirect us to the Postman website. You can see I've already logged in, but once you get here, create an account. Okay. So pause the video, create your account. Once you create your account, let's keep going. We're gonna go to a workspace. So for me, I'm just gonna go to this workspace up here. And then we're going to create a new request. Okay. See, we're going to have this plus sign right here. You're going to press that plus sign. Always choose the HTTP request. And now we have our request format. Okay. You can see you can change what type of request you want to do. For now, we're going to keep it on Git, but let's say you want to do post, you can change it to post or whatever other one you want to do. Okay. Make sure you get to that point. You can pause the video if you need to. And let's continue on, okay? Now, the most important step before you start trying to use an API is to read the documentation. So basically, the documentation is technical content that describes how to use and integrate an API in detail. It's kind of like an instruction manual. So today we're gonna be using this board API. To get comfortable with using APIs. You can see this is the documentation. Usually documentation for APIs is much longer, but this is a pretty simple one, and you can see it's only about like one scroll down, right? So before we continue, pause the video, look through this documentation briefly, and then we can continue. Okay. So now let's actually make a request. Okay. So let's go back to Postman. Okay. Here, this is where we make a request. Let's say we want to make a request to this board API. Okay. Well, we're going to copy and paste the URL. So this is what we call like the base URL, like I was saying before. We paste this, and let's say we just want to get a random data point from this database. Okay. Well, you can see here in the documentation, you can see get a random activity. You can do this by doing /random. So we're going to do just that. We're going to do /random. This is our endpoint. When we press send, you can see our response is here in the body. You can see it gave us take a bubble bath. It'll give you something different, probably because we're all getting random values. Okay, great. So also you should just kind of look around Postman, get used to the way it works, and you can kind of look around, find the different things we were talking about. So for example, we were talking about status codes. You can see the status code is right here. It says 200 OK, which means that it was successful. Because remember, the 2 in the front means that the request was successful. So you can kind of poke around, look at all the different things, see what you recognize, see what is confusing. But let's continue. Okay. So if you remember, the value we got in return for doing the GET request kind of looked like this example right here. It had the curly brackets, the colons. This is what we call a JSON, okay? This is what we call JSON. Okay, so this is like the notation that it's written in. A JSON object is a JavaScript object notation. Okay, basically is a format that stores data in key value pairs. So you can see the keys here are like title, author, classic, blah blah blah, and the values are like 1984, George Orwell, etc. Okay, keys, you can see here in the example, keys are always strings, and then it's always followed by a colon and then the value. But the value can be whatever you want. It can be, let's say, a string, a boolean, an integer. It can even be a nested object like details right here. Okay, but it's always going to follow the format of key, colon, value, comma, key, colon, value, comma, etc. Okay. So, what if I want my GET request to only return responses with certain constraints or parameters? Well, we can also do this. So, let's say I'm using the board API and I want to find a, an activity specifically for cooking. Okay. Well, if we look back at the documentation, you can see it tells us exactly how to do that. We have this filter. Um, yeah, we have this filter endpoint here that we can use to get specific types of activities. Okay, so let's try it out. Okay, so we're gonna change this random here to filter, and then we're gonna add some parameters. So you can type them yourself here, but you can see Postman gives you this params tab to do it in this table format. Okay, so we want to find cooking activities. So the key is going to be type because you can see it's right here is the type, and the value is going to be cooking. Okay, so if we send this, now you can see it gives us all of the activities that are of type cooking. Okay. And let's look at this format. The format's always going to be like this. It's going to be the endpoint name, which is filter, and then any parameters after will be after a question mark. So it's going to be question mark, and then the key, equal sign, and the value you're looking for. Okay? We can change this. Let's say we want it to be like music instead. We can do music, and when we send that, you can see now we have a bunch of music activities. Okay? Hope that makes sense. Let's continue on. Talked about that. So try doing it yourself, okay? What is your recreational activity that you can do in a group of 4 participants? Okay, so go to Postman, pause the video, try to do this on your own, and then tell me or you can't tell me, but see what you get by doing this. And just know that you need multiple parameters to do this, okay? So I'll walk through it in 3, 2, 1. Okay. I hope you did it yourself. Let's try to do it together now, okay? Okay. We know the type is going to be recreational, and then the participants hence is 4. Okay. Now you can see here it added both of our parameters to our URL. You can see parameters, if there's multiple, will always be separated by this and sign. So let's send and see what we get. And the one answer was go see a Broadway production. So I hope you got that answer too. Hope that makes sense. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so next task is working with path parameters. Okay, so a path parameter is a variable included directly in the URL path used to identify a specific resource. So we had the parameters that followed the question mark before, but now we can also have parameters that are directly in the URL. So for example, let's say we want to get a specific user that has a specific username. Well, let's say the endpoint is users. We can do slash and then the path parameter, which is whatever their username is. So let's say we do the endpoint slash user slash John Doe 123. This would basically be asking the server Give me a user whose username is John Doe 123. Okay. So try doing this again on your own. Follow these steps. Go to the Star Wars API and look through this documentation. Okay. Or yeah. And try doing this. What is the name and hyperdrive rating of the starship with the ID of 10? Okay. Again, pause the video and then I'll go over it in three, two, one. Okay. So we know the path parameter is going to be 10. So we can try this out. Okay. If you looked through how to do this, you should know that we can do the endpoint starships slash, and this is going to be our path parameter 10. So let's see what we get. We get Millennium Falcon, that's the name, and then the hyperdrive rating is 0.5. Okay? So hope that makes sense. Hope you did that correctly. Let's continue on. Okay. Oh, and look, we're done. Okay. So I hope the APIs made a little sense. If not, always ask questions on Ed. Next week, we'll be talking about how we use the response we get from the API on a web application and what are API keys and how do we use them. Okay. Um, Good job today. Thank you for coming, and I'll see you next week. Okay. Bye.